Echoes of damnation. In the quaint town of Willowbrook, nestled amidst rolling hills and lush forests, there existed a darkness that lurked just beneath the surface, a darkness that had long been forgotten by the townsfolk, but whose presence lingered like a stain upon the fabric of reality itself. It was here, in the heart of Willowbrook, that the events of our tale unfold, a tale of horror and despair, of a demon returned from the depths of hell to wreak havoc upon the world of the living. The year was 1886, and the town of Willowbrook was abuzz with excitement as preparations for the annual Harvest Festival were underway. The streets were alive with laughter and music, the air filled with the scent of freshly baked pies and autumnal spices. But amidst the festivities, there existed a darkness that whispered of ancient evils and forgotten terrors. It was a darkness that had long been buried beneath the facade of normalcy, but which now threatened to rise once more and engulf the town in its malevolent embrace. As night fell and the streets emptied of revelers, a lone figure emerged from the shadows, its form cloaked in darkness and its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was Azazel, a demon of unspeakable power, whose presence sent shivers down the spines of all who beheld him. Azazel had been banished to the depths of hell centuries ago, his crimes too numerous and heinous to recount. But now, through some dark and twisted magic, he had returned to the world of the living, his thirst for vengeance driving him to seek out those who had wronged him in ages past. His first victim was Father Thomas, the kindly priest who had long served as a beacon of hope and guidance for the people of Willowbrook. As he knelt in prayer in the sanctuary of his church, Azazel descended upon him like a shadow, his eyes burning with malice as he reached out to claim his soul. But Father Thomas was no ordinary man. He was a warrior of faith, a champion of righteousness who had dedicated his life to serving a higher power. With a fervent prayer upon his lips, he raised his crucifix high, the holy symbol glowing with a divine light that drove Azazel back into the darkness from whence he came. Word of the demon's return spread like wildfire through the town, spreading fear and panic in its wake. The townsfolk locked themselves indoors, trembling in terror at the thought of the horrors that lurked outside their doors. But there were those who refused to cower in fear, those who dared to stand against the darkness and fight for the soul of their town. Among them was Sarah, a young woman with fiery eyes and a fierce determination to protect those she loved. With a steely resolve, Sarah gathered a group of brave souls to her side, a motley crew of misfits and outcasts who had nothing to lose and everything to gain by standing against the demon that threatened to destroy their world. Together, they embarked on a quest to uncover the truth behind Azazel's return, delving deep into the darkest corners of Willowbrook in search of answers. Along the way, they encountered horrors beyond imagining, creatures of nightmare and shadows that sought to tear them apart at every turn. But through it all, Sarah and her companions persevered, their bond growing stronger with each trial they faced. And as they drew closer to the heart of the darkness that gripped their town, they uncovered a secret so ancient and terrible that it threatened to tear their world apart at the seams. For Azazel was not alone. He was but a pawn in a much larger game, a game that had been played out over centuries by forces beyond mortal comprehension. And now, with the fate of Willowbrook hanging in the balance, Sarah and her companions found themselves caught in the crossfire of a battle that would determine the very fate of their world. With the knowledge that time was running out, Sarah and her companions raced against the clock to stop Azazel and his dark masters before it was too late. They faced trials and tribulations beyond imagining, their strength and courage tested to their limits as they fought to save their town from the clutches of eternal darkness. But in the end, it was not their strength or their courage that saved them. It was their humanity, their ability to love and to care for one another in the face of unimaginable horror. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, banishing the darkness that had gripped Willowbrook for so long, Sarah and her companions stood victorious, their hearts filled with hope for a brighter future. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew that the darkness would always linger on the edges of their world, waiting for the opportunity to rise once more and claim the souls of the unwary. And so they remained ever vigilant, knowing that the battle against evil was never truly over, but rather an eternal struggle that would continue until the end of time itself. As the morning sun bathed Willowbrook in its golden light, the townsfolk emerged from their homes, their faces etched with relief at the sight of the dawn. But their joy was short-lived. for the events of the previous night had left an indelible mark upon their souls, a mark that would haunt them for the rest of their days. Sarah and her companion stood amidst the wreckage of their town, the echoes of their victory mingling with the distant cries of the fallen. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious, but the cost had been high, and the scars they bore would never truly heal. As they surveyed the devastation wrought by Azazel and his dark masters, Sarah felt a pang of guilt gnaw at her heart. She had led her friends into battle against forces beyond their comprehension, and though they had emerged triumphant, she could not shake the feeling that their victory had come at too great a cost. But even as doubt clouded her mind, Sarah knew that their fight was far from over. For though Azazel had been banished back to the depths of hell, there were other demons lurking in the shadows, waiting for the opportunity to strike. And so, with a heavy heart and a steely resolve, Sarah and her companions vowed to remain ever vigilant, knowing that the darkness would always linger on the edges of their world, waiting for the opportunity to rise once more and claim the souls of the unwary. But amidst the ruins of Willowbrook, there remained a glimmer of hope, a hope born from the courage and sacrifice of those who had stood against the darkness and refused to yield. And as the townsfolk began to rebuild their shattered lives, they knew that so long as they stood together, they would always find the strength to face whatever horrors the future might hold. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone within their hearts, a light that would guide them through the darkest of times and lead them towards a future filled with hope and promise. And so, as the sun dipped below the horizon and night descended once more upon Willowbrook, the townsfolk stood united against the forces of evil, their spirits unbroken and their resolve unwavering in the face of the unknown. As night fell once more over Willowbrook, the townsfolk remained on edge, haunted by the memory of the horrors they had faced. Sarah and her companions, weary from their ordeal, kept a vigilant watch over the town, knowing that the darkness could return at any moment. But despite their best efforts, they could not shake the feeling that something was amiss, that the demon Azazel had not been defeated as thoroughly as they had hoped. There were whispers in the shadows, strange noises in the night, and a sense of unease that hung heavy in the air. And then, one fateful night, their worst fears were realized. As Sarah and her companions patrolled the streets of Willowbrook, they heard a sound that sent shivers down their spines, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very depths of hell itself. With weapons drawn and hearts pounding, they followed the sound to its source, a dark alleyway on the outskirts of town, where the shadows seemed to coalesce into a swirling mass of darkness. As they approached, the air grew thick with the stench of sulfur, and a feeling of dread washed over them like a tidal wave. And then, from out of the darkness, emerged a figure that chilled them to the bone and filled their hearts with terror. It was Azazel, the demon they had thought banished to the depths of hell, his eyes burning with a malevolent light as he fixed them with his gaze. With a roar of fury, Azazel lunged at them, his claws extended and his fangs bared in a rictus grin. Sarah and her companions fought with all their might, but it was clear that they were outmatched. Azazel was more powerful than they had ever imagined, his strength and speed beyond anything they had ever faced before. As they battled for their lives, Sarah and her companions realized with horror that Azazel had not returned alone. He was accompanied by an army of demons, twisted creatures of nightmare and shadow that seemed to materialize out of thin air, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light as they descended upon the town like a swarm of locusts. With the odds stacked against them, Sarah and her companions fought valiantly, their weapons flashing in the darkness as they struggled to hold back the tide of evil that threatened to engulf them. But no matter how hard they fought, it seemed as though they were fighting a losing battle. The demons were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. And then, from out of the light, emerged a figure that Sarah and her companions recognized with a mixture of awe and disbelief. It was Father Thomas, the kindly priest who had been their mentor and guide, his form bathed in a divine radiance that seemed to emanate from the very heavens themselves. With a voice like thunder, Father Thomas called upon the power of the heavens to banish the demons back to hell, his words echoing through the night like a clarion call. And as he spoke, the demons shrieked in agony, their forms writhing and twisting as they were consumed by the light. And then, in an instant, they were gone, vanished back into the darkness from whence they came, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of dread and a town in ruins. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Sarah and her companions emerged from the darkness, weary but triumphant. They had faced the forces of evil and emerged victorious, thanks to the bravery and sacrifice of those who had stood by their side. But even as they celebrated their victory, they knew that the battle against evil was far from over. For though they had banished Azazel and his minions back to hell, they knew that the darkness would always linger on the edges of their world, waiting for the opportunity to rise once more and claim the souls of the unwary. And so, as they looked out over the ruins of Willowbrook, they vowed to remain ever vigilant, knowing that so long as they stood together, they would always find the strength to face whatever horrors the future might hold. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light that shone within their hearts, a light that would guide them through the darkest of times and lead them towards a future filled with hope and promise.